Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, and welcome to the Money and You show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host, and I have a fabulous guest on today. I'm super excited to bring her on and have a great discussion that is so relevant to what's going on in the world today. And before we do that, I just want to make mention of something that I think is somewhat related. And that's, I don't know about you, but I've been seeing an awful lot about just burnout in the workplace. And it's a thing my clients are talking to me about, and people are really feeling it. And I have to believe it's a combination of everything going on in the world and everything from the bad news to the politics to of course, COVID. And people are just kind of tired. And I can't help but think that's why Christmas is everywhere already at the beginning of November. Everywhere you look, people are just, I think, trying to feel a little more relaxed and calm down and try to enjoy life a bit. And the general message out there is, I'm tired. And so today I'm going to bring on Michelle E. Dickinson, who is going to be our guest. And I can't wait to talk to her. She has so much to say on this topic and others related to mental health. So I'm going to jump in right now. Michelle is a wellbeing strategist, an author, a TEDx speaker, and a passionate mental and health change agent. Michelle E. Dickinson is also the author of a memoir entitled Breaking Into My Life. Michelle goes first and sees herself as the bridge that helps people get comfortable with their mental health so they can reach out and get the support they need before they hit a crisis. She makes it okay to not be okay and thrives on making a real difference in the lives of others, especially around their well-being. After years of playing the role of child caregiver to her bipolar mother, Michelle embarked on her own healing journey of self-discovery. She went on to spend years working to eradicate the mental health stigma within her own workplace by elevating empathy and compassion, causing more open conversations and leading real change in how mental illness is understood. She was instrumental in building the largest and fastest growing employee mental health employer resource group while at her Fortune 500 company. She also knows firsthand what it feels like to struggle with a mental illness after experiencing her own depression due to her divorce. This has provided her with a rich perspective. Michelle is out to do her part to eliminate the stigma by normalizing the mental well-being conversation within the workplace and beyond. She partners with innovative leaders to bring them her psychological resilience programs and mental health strategies to recenter employees and cultivate cultures of compassion. Her signature resilience webinar has made a positive impact on thousands of employees during COVID-19. Michelle, welcome. So happy to have you on today.
I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, this is going to be great because I love what you're talking about, what you do. And obviously, I'm all about people doing work that fulfills them and is purposeful. And you have certainly found that. And the timing is so perfect. I've got a couple of younger kids, young adults, 21 and 24, and the topic of mental illness has never been there's never been so much of a conversation around it. Certainly not when I was their age. There was no conversation around it. So I just think this is great. And people sort of just get by at work feeling really unwell a lot of the time. And I think bringing this into the workplace is crucial, and I can't wait to hear more about how you're doing that. So can you give us a little background on how you got into this work?
Sure. Yeah, I spent 19 years in a corporate environment, and I thought I was pretty content doing that work. I then shared the story of my childhood with a colleague, and that experience that I had growing up was that I grew up with a bipolar mother. and I cared for her. It was a lot like the role reversal where the child cares for the parent instead of the parent caring for the child. And so that whole experience shaped me, but yet it was something that I rarely ever spoke about. And a colleague found out that I had this experience, and she had asked if I was okay with her nominating me to give a TED talk about it. And so I said yes, and I found myself telling my story after not really talking about it for many, many years. But that was extremely powerful because the power of storytelling really has a way of creating an opening for other people. So the reaction to the TED Talk was really something that changed me, and it had me get really connected to how we need more people to go first in talking about mental illness openly. And that led me to write my memoir, Breaking Into My Life, which then led me to ultimately to leave the corporate world and to create my company, Trifecta Mental Health, where I do bring compassion and resilience training to the workplace. I bring more compassion back to the workplace because we are human beings before we are employees. And I believe that every workplace has the ability to be more compassionate and resilient, especially now, given COVID.
Yes, thank you. And you're reminding me of what I didn't say in the beginning when I was talking about burnout. Yes, it's a fact, but I didn't conclude what I was trying to say, which was in listening to people and reading something about this, what seems to be, one of the big solutions for this is connection with others, but also connection with yourself. And I think it's such an important thing, and it's just coming up constantly, whether you want to change careers or even with money. It's the same thing. And this is the Money and You show, and people might be looking at this and saying, well, why are we talking about this on the Money and You show? Because without some degree of mental stability and well-being, money is just one of those things that is very hard to manage and very hard to even pay attention to. So just
Yeah.
going to jump in and kind of pull those things together. So, okay, so we could talk all day just about how it was to tell your story for the first time after sort of keeping that under wraps. But what happened as a result of telling your story?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was, I had the idea I would write a book, but I never realized I would write a memoir. I never realized I would write it right after giving the TED Talk. But I think I was really compelled to do that. And because I knew that if I could humanize mental health, that I could help people fear mental illness less, understand it more. And I think that if we're out to create a world that is stigma free, we need more understanding of what it's really like. And oftentimes people who have no relationship to mental illness are looking through the lens of the media or through, things they hear versus a personal story. So that really was everything to me. And I also never experienced the mental illness until I went through my own divorce. So it was a combination of telling my mother's story, writing the memoir, releasing it, becoming an outspoken advocate, talking about mental illness, but then also going through my own personal journey of, so this is what depression feels like. So this is what perhaps my mother was experiencing as she was trying to raise a daughter, Right. So I think all of those experiences really did catapult me into the direction that I am in today. And then, working in the corporate environment and, just being in a space where so often employees are expected to leave their challenges at home and come into work. But in reality, we can't do that. We are who we are, and we bring our whole selves to work every single day. And so I think for me, even going through my own depression and how I was treated and how people would interact with me because I was open about it, really just, it taught me a lot. And it taught me that acceptance of people of all abilities is really so important, especially in the workplace, and how leaders lead people with those challenges, because life events are going to happen. It says a lot about the company. It says a lot about the culture. I can make or break the experience of the individual who's going through a challenge. So all of that led me ultimately to create my company, because I saw an opportunity for us to do more and create more compassionate work.
Right, right. Yeah, and compassion, you're so right. I had flashbacks when you were speaking just about the effort I made when I first got into my corporate life decades ago. And that whole idea of you walk into that workplace like a robot, like you have no feelings, you have no problems, it's you are there for one sole purpose, which is to do the job as well as you can do it. And this is one more thing that I love that's changing about the workplace. And as a business owner, I mean, I'm a business owner too, and I know that you can't just be focused on other people's problems all day long. I mean, you do have business that needs to get done, but this humanity that is really being forced into the workplace now, partly because people are leaving and people are saying, I have to bring more of myself into the workplace. It's fascinating to me. I just think it's a huge shift. And
Yeah, I think that's the silver lining of the pandemic. You'll hear people saying that, is that because of the prevalence of mental health challenges because of the pandemic, it's coming to light more and more people are talking about it. There's a recent study that came out that said 42% of the global workforce has experienced a decline in their well-being, their mental health, since the beginning of the pandemic. So 42% of every workplace, you have to realize the magnitude of that and how many people are struggling but may not be talking about it. And so if that's the number, then it really does deserve more attention and more conversation, so people get care. Because the reality is if you're not talking about it, there's a lot of shame, a lot of fear, and ultimately more suffering and silence.
Right. And so what do you see happening? What are you helping to, bring to the table, and what do you see companies doing? Are they changing?
Yeah, it's exciting. I get to work with some amazing organizations who really do get it. They get the value of helping their people now more than ever. So there's two ways in which I do that. The first is that I bring in my resilience program, and my resilience program really reminds people of where they do have control. In a world where we're living through this pandemic and so much is being removed from our lives and changing, we forget that we fundamentally have control over what we're consuming in our minds. Our daily practices, our routines, things that we know that nourishes us, and boundaries to help us feel better. So I'm teaching resilience to the employees, but more importantly is I'm teaching leaders what to look for and how to engage safely in a conversation if they notice their employees' behavior is changing. There's so much trepidation that leaders have around saying the wrong thing, overstepping, even their own biases towards mental health that prevent them from really connecting with their people. So I'm out to really empower them, give them more confidence that they can have those conversations and really be supportive.
Yeah, fascinating, because I could see where people would be very, skittish about getting into people's personal lives too much. Where are the boundaries there? I mean, what are even the legalities there?
Right. And a lot of people, because of that, they shy away and do nothing. So the reality is, let's talk about the impact first. If you notice someone struggling and you make the assumption they'll work it out on their own, and maybe they don't have anyone looking after them beside where they spend the majority of their time at work, that's a recipe for disaster, because we're assuming that they're going to get care from someone, or they're going to be looked after by someone else. So that's the first thing. As a human being, as a compassionate person with a heart, how can you look the other way and make the assumption they're going to be okay? These are people that you work with, how many hours a week? So we want to encourage that it's okay to connect with your people. As far as the boundaries, oftentimes we feel like we have to take the role of the clinician or the therapist on in order to engage, and that's not the case. Simply listening, simply extending yourself, simply identifying that you notice their behavior is a little bit different than you know them to be. And then just sitting back and listening, just listening to what is there for them if they care to share, could be all the gift that you can give them. And knowing the resources that you offer as an organization and how to bridge them to that care. So you don't have to have the answers. You can simply listen to them. But here's the thing. It goes back even further. If you want an employee to proactively connect with you and tell you that they're struggling, you and the employee have to do their part to cultivate trust every single day. So what are you doing to help build that trust and that rapport with your leader and vice versa? So that there is that space that if someone's dealing with something in their lives, because right now a lot of people are dealing with things, you want them to be proactive and reach out and connect with you so that you know and you can support them.
Yeah, it is tricky because the employee can feel like if I share this, maybe that will negatively impact my future, my potential promotions, things like that. So
yeah, and that is the trepidation. But in one of my programs, I highlight 7 different myths, and actually there's been a lot of research done. And that's the trepidation. Employees feel like if I disclose that I'm dealing with something right now, I'm not going to be considered as a strong player. I'm not going to be considered for a promotion or an opportunity because I'm perceived as weak. And the data actually says that people who come to the table with challenges, emotional challenges, who are managing it, they are just as effective as any other employee. So we have to start doing more to have leaders and employees recognize that just because you're dealing with a life challenge or a mental health challenge doesn't diminish your capacity to be a full player in the workplace.
Yeah, it really, as you speak, I can see how it there's so many fundamental aspects to this, because I think the leader too has to sort of commit to this type of attitude of being compassionate and helpful, and I'm not sure everybody really naturally feels that way when they're in a position of responsibility or whatever. Yeah. What are you finding with people? Are they open to this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a conversation with a collection of partners at a firm a little while ago, and they we are such analytical people. We are always looking for the solution, right? And so the question that came up was, well, what's the prerequisite for a leader to be able to have these kinds of conversations? And I tried not to laugh, but I came back and said, compassion, a heart, recognizing that you have an employee who might be suffering, and putting everything else aside and just coming from a space of concern and compassion. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can quite honestly just be extending yourself and listening. And I think we tend to want to overthink it, right? Like okay, so there's a lot of courses out there that companies are putting their people through that give them a lot of clinical information, including signs and symptoms of clinical diagnoses. That, in my opinion, is a little too much information. Yeah. When in reality, just talking to them and listening and bridging them to care is the best you could do.
Right.
I'm sorry, there's an ambulance flying by my place.
No worries. Yeah, it is very interesting, because I feel like it's a total mindset shift, just like so many things are. And so to kind of rework that idea of what's okay in the workplace. And I think for a lot of the leaders, they probably came up, the same way I did, in that world where we leave our heart. Our heart is at home with our family, and it doesn't necessarily enter the workplace. So it's yet another shift. But
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you want to cultivate a psychologically safe environment for your people. So how do you create psychological safety is by, even creating more authenticity and vulnerability, because, people don't want to feel like they can't share, because then that doesn't feel like a safe environment. So I think leaders need to be thinking, is my environment psychologically safe for my people? Do they feel like they can talk? Do they feel like they can be honest about what they're dealing with? or no, So I think it's a different environment now. It's a different world than years ago. People will leave an organization where the culture doesn't align with their values. I mean, we're seeing a lot of change right now with the Great Resignation and people saying, you know what, the way that this company operated during the pandemic is not a company I want to be a part of. I really do want to go someplace where my values are more aligned. So it's a very interesting time.
It is, and still, despite knowing this and sort of expecting that employers are paying attention, and I do know many who are trying to change the workplace so that it does have more humanity and it is a better place for employees. And yet I'll hear from clients and from friends about their workplaces, and wow, there are some really unsophisticated leaders out there, I guess, to put it politely. But some of the things that are going on, I can't imagine that they'll have any employees, in 6 months the way they're operating, because they don't need to stick around anymore. I mean, I'm advising people to just leave some of these environments because clearly you can find a better environment right now. So
it's very true. I've had some very interesting conversations over the course of the past few months. I had one gentleman tell me that he doesn't understand mental health because he's tough. He's tougher than most. I remember him saying that. He's like, I'm tougher than most. Some people, they're just not tough. So they deal with mental illness. And I was like, it has nothing to do with toughness. And so I'm trying to educate that person on the scenario. And it's just so interesting. And then you have other leaders who just want to manage mental health challenges from a performance perspective. And all that does is add a layer of stress on top of what that poor employee is dealing with.
Right.
So there's some opportunity here, but then also in their defense, just like every other leadership growth opportunities, we have to check our own biases, right? Like, so I try to do my part with my leaders program to really get them to say, what is your personal relationship to mental health? Because if your relationship is skewed, that's how you are going to lead your people. If you believe that it is not legitimate, that it's a cop-out, that it's for weak people, if you have all these belief systems in your mind, imagine that that's how you're leading your people. So I do a deep dive in biases and understanding if you have biases around mental illness, because that's a very important aspect to being an effective leader and creating psychological safety.
Yeah, huge. That's really important. So, what are you seeing in the workplace? What sort of, I mean, I'm sure you see everything actually, but are there some mental illness related kind of things going on that are more prevalent than others?
Yeah, I mean, before the pandemic, that it was said that Americans would experience either some type of a mental health challenge. It was like 1 in 5 would experience a mental health challenge in their lifetime. But because of the pandemic, it's 1 in 3 are either dealing with depression or anxiety. So I would say those two are prevalent, because think about the magnitude of loss, the magnitude of life that we've seen, that we've lost through the pandemic, the loss of stability, the loss of finances, the loss of routine, things we like to do, travel, all of these things. There's so much loss that we've experienced. So it makes sense. A lot of people are feeling disempowered, depressed, even anxious, like, this return to work phase that's happening. People still don't feel very safe going into the office, so that you have anxiety. So I would say those are probably the most prevalent is anxiety and depression. And then other people just, it's sort of like they don't realize that they are struggling because they diminish the fact that we're all in this pandemic. And so who are they to complain about the fact that they're not doing well? And I try to really remind people that, if you don't have the level of joy that you remember that you can have, then that means that maybe there's an opportunity for you to start reflecting on what are your daily practices, what's your routine, are you taking care of yourself, and are you okay with reaching out for clinical support to get you to a point where you're feeling better. So all of these kinds of conversations are so important now. because I think more and more people are starting to realize that they're not 100%. And it's just because we've been living through a major pandemic, you know?
Right, right. And what are some of the things that the companies are doing? Are they bringing in clinicians?
Yeah.
What are they offering to people now?
Yeah, so traditionally, most organizations had offered benefits and employee assistance hotlines, and they're great. I think that that's wonderful. The biggest challenge, and that's why I do the work I do, is normalizing the narrative around mental health. Because if you can have benefits, but if employees are not comfortable acknowledging that they're not doing well and they don't have the courage to pick up the phone and reach out for support, then you're paying for benefits that are going underutilized. So I think the employers that I've had the privilege to work with get it because they want to give a little bit more to their people than the average, which is the benefits and EAP, and helping them preserve their mental health. So, what is it that you can do as an employer that's going to preserve your people's mental health, get them comfortable talking about brain health so they know where to go for support before you lose them to disability, before you lose them to a crisis. So the companies that I've been fortunate to work with, they get it. And so what I'm seeing is they want to do a little bit more because they know that it's going to keep their employees, you know, feeling good in their seats, productive, and getting through this pandemic and coming out the other side, maybe even with some more loyalty with their employee population.
Yeah, absolutely. I would think it would build a lot of loyalty. And I think, when you do start looking at the dollars, there is just an enormous cost to people leaving your company and having to rehire and retrain. And,
Yeah.
so there is an enormous economic impact from.
For sure. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Turnover, disability costs, all of it. I mean, and, you know, even engagement, employees who are working but not engaged and not, you know, not present, not actually contributing to the caliber that you know that they can and they want to, but they're struggling. So absolutely, I think it's critical that leaders be looking at, well, what else can I do to support my people so they're feeling good and they're you know they're feeling good about what they're up to in their personal and in their professional lives.
Right, right. So tell me, when you introduce employees to your program, um, how do you do that? Do you bring it to the workplace? Is it something they do on their
Yeah.
own?
Yeah, no, we do interactive workshops through video chat. That's what a lot of people are comfortable with doing right now. And so it's interactive. There are some opportunities where they can chime in if they feel comfortable to. We don't have a lot of these are not invasive questions. It's
Right.
just, you know, can you relate to, you know, A, B, or C? Yes or no? Drop in the chat if you can. But fundamentally, the resilience program is really about getting them connected to how they're really doing. Because oftentimes, you know, that's the linchpin. That's like the most important thing is that you're self aware that you might be slipping. You might not be 100%. You might be having days where you don't want to get out of bed. Getting them present to that so that they stop being busy and they check in with themselves is really the first step. And so we do that. And then I walk them through a series of things that they can do to really help themselves start to feel better. And it's not rocket science, Michelle. It's like literally things that your mother probably taught you as a child to do, like good sleep, good diet, exercising your body, connecting with people you love, doing things that you love outside of work. All of those things all feed into us feeling more balanced and preserving our well-being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I feel like forever we've had it so backwards, me included, especially. I don't know. But, work really, really hard and accomplish a bunch of things and then have some fun, then reward yourself.
Yeah.
And it's just really should be flipped upside down.
Yeah, it's a balance. It's a balancing act. I mean, I can, for example, like for me, like I love pottery. So if
Oh,
I
me
throw
too.
clay on the wheel and I get in the zone and I forget and completely disconnect from work, like I come away from that recharged, like completely recharged. So it's almost like you have to realize doing something you love and getting lost in it for a little bit of time, what that can really do for your psyche and how that can recharge you to come back into your life and be even more effective.
I love that you said that. I didn't know that about you, but I spent 10 years going from my corporate job to a ceramic studio, and that was my total escape. And
Yeah,
same thing. I mean, it was amazing. Yeah. So,
I love it.
yeah, I thought I'd be a potter. Like, I thought that's where I was headed, but
So fun.
little
Yeah.
too isolated, I think. But I still love it, and I love that you said that because, honestly, I feel like I'm missing that now. That thing that you
Yeah.
just get so engrossed in, and time goes, and you can't even believe 4 hours are gone. And that's a
Yeah.
great feeling when you're in that zone.
It is. And you're
So,
using the other part of your brain too. So like
100%.
I like to tell people, try to use that creative side of your brain. It gives you a break.
Yeah.
And like we need that. We can't be all analytical all the time. Like go have some fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what fuels you. And people, same thing when you're out of work, when you're in career transition, and, people need to take care of themselves first so they can go into that job search with a positive
Right.
energy and, looking at life in a positive way. And so, yeah, I'd love that. Tell me a little about the resilience piece. Like when you talk about resilience, is that what it's about, like bolstering yourself so you can be more resilient, or is there something
Yeah.
else to it?
Individual, like it's really about individuals preserving their well-being. So for example, like I did a session this morning, we talked about stress, the impact physically on the body and stress and how it impacts the mind. So compounded stress can literally cause us to get sick if we're not taking care and managing that stress in and of itself is not a bad thing, right? It can give
Mm-hmm.
us strength when we need it, but if we're not managing high levels of compounded stress over a period of time, it depletes us.
Right.
So, for example, I am a big advocate for meditation. Meditation is a great way because stress releases the cortisol, and the cortisol is very high in our bodies, and there's not really a way to get rid of it. I think maybe if you work out, but it's been said that meditation can actually help dissipate the cortisol. So
Mm-hmm.
I like to teach people to start adopting a meditative practice. And so the biggest challenge I have with corporate people is they're like, well, I try to meditate and I can't silence my mind. I still have thoughts. So I'm trying to make meditation palatable and have them get that there's no real wrong way of meditating. You will have thought, it's perfectly natural. We have 6,000, was it like 60,000
Yeah.
thoughts
Yeah.
a day, some crazy number. It's normal, but if I break it down and I give you a 3-minute meditation and you're able to go through that 3-minute meditation and taste what that peace feels like, then
Mm-hmm.
maybe you'll go and do it on your own. And maybe instead of 3 minutes, you'll do it for 5.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really trying to build them up and have them realize these are the practices that are going to help mitigate stress, help preserve your well-being, and build that resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
So just little tools and things that we can adopt that can really make a big difference in our lives.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's fantastic. And it has a ripple effect into your family life and everything else. So it's really
Yeah.
important with all aspects of life. So, yes, this is great. How can people connect with you? How can they have access to what you offer? Because I'm sure people would, I'm sure everyone would benefit from this. All of us.
Awesome. Thank you for asking. So I would say for the workplace, I'm working with all industries from food manufacturers to hospitality to I'm actually going to be at um, a trucking site in a few weeks. So any industry can benefit from this work, I will tell you. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. That makes the most sense. So you can follow me, Michelle E. Dickinson, on LinkedIn. I have free webinars coming up on November 19th. I'm doing a free webinar for educator resilience. So if you're a
Nice.
teacher or a superintendent, or you're responsible for teachers, you definitely will want to check that out because resilience amongst teachers is very important right now. They're really stressed. And then I have a people leader session where I was telling you a little bit about the people leader work that I do. And that's on November 19th as well. And so if you go to my LinkedIn page, you can find those two events under my profile.
Great.
So that's a great place to find me. But then also my website, careforyourpeople.com, is my workplace mental health page, and you can connect with me there or on LinkedIn.
Okay, wonderful. And yeah, that's great. I'm going to check that out myself and be on one of them. So
Yeah.
yeah, there are so many industries. Education is a big one. I know a lot of people in education personally who have really struggled.
Yeah.
Healthcare, I mean, are you focusing on specific industries that are being hit hard right now, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, it's funny because I was so focused on the workplace, the corporate workplace, because that's where I spent most of my career,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then I have dear friends who are in education, and they're telling me teachers are really struggling right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it made sense for me to start talking to more superintendents and more educators. So that's really, I will go wherever my services are needed and asked for. I think that this applies to everyone.
Right.
So I don't say no. Even a bar, I had a friend of mine say, "Come and talk to our wait staff. They're really stressed," and I said,
Yeah.
"Absolutely, I will." So
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. That is great. And I really hope that this catches on like wildfire and all the employers out there are really implementing some form of this type of help because I think
yeah,
it's
it's just a little bit more,
yeah.
like that's the thing. Like, just do a little bit more for your people right now. They will
Mhm.
remember that. They will appreciate you for doing it. I
Mhm.
hear time and time again at the end of my programs, "Thank you for the work that you're doing for me, but now I get to take all these nuggets home to my partner and to my
Mhm.
family,
Yeah.
and we can do this together." And I think that would just go so far for your people if you did a little bit extra for them.
Yeah, do you get objections to it? I mean, in terms of money? I mean, do people say, oh, we can't afford to do this? Because, I mean, it's so silly to me. I mean, you can't
Yeah,
really afford not
yeah,
to do it.
I mean, money's a real issue for some, especially for smaller organizations. That is something because they already are investing in benefits and EAP. So it's really an education at that point. The
Mhm.
prevalence of mental health issues. Like I said, 42% of the global workforce experiencing some type of decline. So at that point, it's just an education. It's like, you want to keep your people healthy and in their seat.
Mhm.
Think about the value of doing a little bit more,
Mhm.
and they pretty much then realize it makes good sense to put some additional financial support behind this.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a last thing, can you tell us a little about your book and
Yeah.
what that's about?
Yeah, sure. So, Breaking Into My Life is the memoir that I released a few years ago. I'm actually in the process of recording the audiobook because that seems to be highly requested. It is the memoir of my life growing up with my mother and caring for her through my childhood, adolescent years, and adult life. And it's really designed to just help people understand mental health. If you grew up with a parent who is undiagnosed, but you think had a mental illness, you'll probably relate to the story. And it also is a very uplifting book at the end because I can see how all of those experiences have really served me in the work that I get to do today. So just because you're given lemons in your life doesn't mean you can't make lemonade.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. And I love the work that you're doing. I love your journey into, a career that is really something that is a passion of yours and you're really doing a lot to serve the world and particularly the work world, which I find really important. We do spend a lot of hours of our life at work and it should be something that we enjoy. And we shouldn't have to
Thank you.
run off to the pottery studio
Yes.
to be happy.
Thank you, my fellow Potter. Thank
Yeah.
you for having me, Michelle.
Well, I really appreciate you being here, and I really want to spread the word of what you do. So, listeners, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you will reach out to Michelle and read her book, listen to her TED Talk, which I've heard, and it's great. And think about it, whether you're an employee or an employer, how you might make use of her programs. So we like to end the Money and You show with a money tip. And today, I think it's really important to just ask yourself when it comes to money, what is one aspect of your mental health that maybe that might be impacting your financial life? If you're anxious, if you're depressed, if you have something else going on, how is that impacting you financially? And, maybe that could be a catalyst to making some change, because that does matter. And is it, we might be thinking that the two are very separate, but I think if you stop and ask yourself that question, you might come up with something that you might need to look at in that regard as well. So thank you so much for being here. We are here every Monday at 7, streaming live on ubngo.com. And then you can find us on all the podcast platforms and on the Limit Free Life YouTube channel. Love for you to subscribe, leave comments. That really helps us to keep going. And if you have questions for me, you can certainly reach out to limitfreelife.com. Michelle, 2 L's, at limitfreelife.com. You can email me. Ask me any questions. I've got, for those of you who are in need of a career change, I have a career change kit on my career services page that is free. You can grab that and go through that work to at least give you a great overview of how you might look at clarifying what you would like to be doing next and how to go about doing it. So there's some other freebies too. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next week.